So let me just start off by thanking, of course, Thai for hosting us. Thai is sponsoring the food, of course, the location as well. And we're going to talk about the Startup Leadership Program a little bit later. Obviously, the intent here is to give you a flavor of how we run the Startup Leadership Program classes. So we'll go into the details of exactly how this program is structured. But what I wanted to do was to share with you sort of just today's agenda. First of all, we'll have a 45-minute panel discussion with some questions and answers that I'd like to propose to them. And in the meanwhile, if you can also email me any questions you have. So after the first 45 minutes, we'll open up for more Q&A, open Q&A with you guys asking the panel also questions. The topic again is startup essentials and pitfalls, right? So these folks here, the esteemed panel that we have here, they really are CEOs of companies that have been existing, been very successful in many ways. So they'll give us their insights into how they've been dealing with many challenges that all of us face when we are doing our startups, all right? So the one quick intro in terms of how we do startup leadership itself is this notion of having a CEO for a class, okay? So if you're part of this program, you go for 16 or 18 weeks, but each week there is a class CEO who is given a specific topic to go research and invite speakers and get them to accept and figure out the agenda for that class. So in some sense, you can think I'm the CEO for this class, all right? So I had to get Thai to sponsor us. I had to work with the speakers to get the agenda right. I had to work with them. So that's sort of an important part about sort of it forces you out of your comfort zone where all you're doing in a typical class situation is you're sitting there, somebody's done all the organizing on this end, you come and listen, all right? So here it's actually you learn by actually doing it, and in a startup situation that's very typical where you have to go and make cold calls and reach out to people you've never met and ask them to do something for you, but this actually kind of gets you into that mode. So this is a very hands-on nature of the class, and obviously even in this process, even though I'm a fellow of Startup Leadership Program, which means I graduated, actually this event itself has taught me several new things that I did not know before. Okay, so there are 2 more recruiting events planned. So this is what we call a recruiting event, but the latter part of it is where we'll talk about startup leadership. In the beginning, we'll talk about the more generic topic, but there are 2 more recruiting events, and again, we'll give you a flavor of the kinds of things we address in the SLP itself. One is called Legal Nuts and Bolts for Startups. So we will actually have attorneys come in and talk about IP. They'll talk about human resources. They'll talk about how to incorporate. Those kinds of things will be discussed by 3 different attorneys. Just like we have 4 CEOs here, we'll have 3 attorneys discussing that one topic, again, for at least an hour and a half. That's one topic. The second one is how to get funded by angels, and we'll have a very well-known angel in the Valley who will come and talk about that topic. We're also looking at yet one more event where we'll have some VCs come and talk. So this is typical of what a Startup Leadership Program course looks like, all right? So hopefully today you'll get a flavor, and my objective is if you like this kind of format, you would want to join and at least apply for the program. Typically, we get 2 to 3 times the number of seats that we have, so it's a very selective program. But I definitely encourage you to apply if you like this program and what we're doing here. With that, I'd like to switch over to the panel, and I'll come back later and talk about the SLP in more detail. All right? Okay, so I'm going to step here up on the stage and ask our panel to introduce themselves. We'll start with the lady first. So Nina, if you can tell us a little bit about your background, your specific company, what are you doing, and also how did the SLP help you through this process? So go ahead.
Hi, so my name's Nina Bhatti, and I'm the founder of a company called Kokko, and we do color-accurate apps for beauty. So we can take a selfie and let a woman know exactly what the right shade of cosmetics are that are going to make her look lovely. This is actually based on very deep imaging technology, and I pioneered the area of mobile applications for color, and that was kind of my research that I did, and then I decided to form this company to take that and commercialize it. So I came out of a research background. I've led product groups as well, so I've done product management as well. And doing this startup, this was my first startup I've done. I ended up learning by being the CEO and the founder and kind of doing it the hard way. It'd be nice to have done one and kind of followed somebody else, but I got to learn on the job. So the SLP program I joined last year, and it was incredibly helpful because there was a cohort of people who are also trying to figure it out. It was a very good thing to have a group of people you met with pretty much weekly that you could connect with and bring up what you're struggling with. The curriculum takes you through all aspects. And the way I look at startups is you think you covered it once, and then you end up kind of like a spiral, like you do everything again and again. So maybe you think, oh, I kind of know what this legal thing's about. But then the second time you see it or a different lawyer comes and talks about it, you realize, oh, that's what that meant. So it's kind of like you're getting this refresh of the content. And no matter where you are, advanced or just starting out, you get something out of every class. And you put in what you put in, and it really dictates what you get out of it. So for me, it was an excellent program. Lightweight, you put in what you want, you get what you put into it, and yet you could tailor it for where you were in your process. So some people were just an idea, thinking about maybe leaving their well-paying, stable job, to I'm all in, I got nothing, I got to make this thing work. So wherever you are on that spectrum, I think you'll get something out of it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ankit Jain, CEO of Quettra. We're a mobile intelligence company. We help app developers ask the right questions about their apps and then improve it with a focus on improving the user experience and engagement. How do you get people to actually keep using your app, not just download your app once? I joined SLP in 2010, I believe, quite a few years ago. And then along with Ankit Agarwal, we were the program leads for the program for a couple of years after that. So I've seen SLP from many different lenses over the years. I originally joined SLP after a previous startup that I was a member of was acquired by Google. So I just joined Google. I knew I was going to do my own startup in a few years, but I wanted to kind of get into the network of folks already doing it. So kind of at a different stage of entrepreneurship than where Nina was when she joined SLP. And what I found was being a CEO and looking back at it now is all about hearing the same concepts, seeing the same experiences, and having others, understanding from other struggles over and over again, and getting that ingrained in you. Now that I run a startup, the problems I face are very different than what we talked about, the specific cases, but the patterns are similar. The people I talk to are folks that are friends that I made through SLP. People always ask me, who's one person that you have always stayed in touch with? I've gone playing badminton with Ankit. We ran SLP together. We've done a lot of things, and he's just one of many people from the SLP family that we've been able to be in touch with. So even outside of just the course curriculum and the things that you learn, it's the relationships that you build and the fact that everyone in the SLP ecosystem is there to do startups, to try and give themselves a chance. So I think it was very worthwhile for me. So for those that are even dreaming of doing a startup, it's a very good place to start.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ankit. I run a technology and data company called Micello. We're on a mission to map out every building indoors. So think of us as Google Maps inside a building. We're a straight enterprise sales company. We power indoor maps for Cisco, Apple, Ruckus, all kinds of tech companies. About 100 people headquartered down the street in Santa Clara. I started Micello 7 or 8 years ago. I was in college. I was 20 years old. I joined SLP maybe a year or two into it. So my experience was very different from the other folks up here. I had already started my company, and for me, SLP was more of a peer group more than anything else. It was a way where every month I could hang out and kind of socialize about startups and unwind and mentally unload all the frustrations of running a startup with a safe group. And to Ankit's point of a few seconds ago, I've been involved now for many years. It's a great community of people who we can just reach out to and play badminton with. Just the other day, Sanjay reviewed a legal contract for me. There's a really nice peer community here. So I'd encourage you, if you're thinking about doing a startup or already have started a company, if you need a really nice peer network, this is a good one.
Good evening. My name is Hooman Hodjat. I was the founder and CEO of Pickup Zone, a startup that I founded in 2008 that went through the ups and downs of a startup and eventually was acquired by ShopRunner. I was actually also on I guess the class of 2008 at SLP, which was officially the second class. But in some ways, SLP was my other startup. So we were part of a team that started this group out in Boston with Anupendra Sharma, and we started to try to put together the model for the program and how these weekly and monthly activities were going to be done and what we were trying to achieve. And I think what I'm proud of is that it's gotten so much better and bigger and a much broader organization that I could have ever imagined. So that's one of the best things about it that I've been a part of. I could echo everything that the group has said about the values of the program. One of the things is the fact that the group is continuously involved and it's now a global organization. So your contacts go far beyond the cohort and the locality that you're involved in, and now you have access to people that are all over the world, some of whom may have very, very similar mindsets as you, that can provide you with feedback, that can be a shoulder to cry on. I've had a few of those, and and be your support group and to help you continue your journey as an entrepreneur.
Great. Okay, thank you. Thanks, folks. So let me jump into the meat of the discussion, which is startup essentials and pitfalls. So the first question I have for our panel is, I have many ideas. How do I figure out if any of them are business worthy? How important actually is the idea itself? Is that a good place to start? Yeah. All right. Okay. So let's start with Ankit Jain.
All right. So for many years, especially after doing SLP, I was still at Google. So I was always thinking about, I want to start a company. What should I start? And the test I finally gave myself was, if there's an idea that I can sleep over for a couple of weeks and still be excited by it, it's probably something worth trying. So I quit Google on a whim, saying, I'm 27, I need to do a startup. If I don't do it now, at some point my family will say you need to get married. And at that point, I will have no intention of leaving a nice, well-paying job until I have kids who are old, and then I can take a risk. So it was like, all right, 15 years in the future. So I just quit my job at Google and said, well, now that I don't have a job, I got to figure out what I'm doing. There were quite a few ideas that I brainstormed, but most of them, after a day or two, were pretty easy to throw out the window. Something that it was exciting at first, but after a couple of days, not something that was deeply exciting. Not something that I could see myself doing for a couple of years. I mean, I got bored of it after a couple of days. But about 3 months in, there was an idea that I just kept getting back to. And it sounded like something that could potentially be an interesting large-size business. And that's what's turned into what Quettra is today. But it's very different than what I was imagining back then. So at that point, I actually decided to go on a vacation for a couple of weeks, hike the Machu Picchu, and the test to myself was, if even after all that I come back and I'm still excited by it, then I should go ahead, incorporate, raise some money, and build a business. And so I went, hiked, came back, and I was still thinking about that same problem. And so I said, you know what, I've tested myself enough, because I'm one of those people that also likes to get bored of things once in a while, but I stuck around with this idea long enough. So I came back, got started building a first version while fundraising in parallel, fundraised on the story that I originally had. The thing I realize now is that every single day, that idea has morphed. Even from the day I said, this is the idea I want to work on, or even from the day I closed our seed round. My investors have seen it morph all through this journey. And if I look at my slide deck that I presented to my first investor versus a slide deck I gave an update a week ago, I've got every month's update, and it's very interesting to see how companies morph. So looking back at it, I would just say, if you want to do a startup, start something and let it morph into something that matters. Because regardless of what you think will be big, what's most important is to get out there and start iterating. A lot of people talk about an MVP and then iterating. It's just as important for your idea as it is for your product, as it is for your team. You need to start building your team. You're going to make mistakes. You iterate on it. Sometimes you let people go. Sometimes you let co-founders go, or you have a split. A lot of us in SLP have talked about this, and it sounds scary. It sounds theoretical to some, but those are all realities. And I think most of us have had battle scars of different kinds. But if you want to do a startup, it's just important to get out there and just get started, regardless of what that initial idea is, as long as you think it has some legs to morph from.
Okay. If I ever start another company, I would totally follow Ankit's advice, right? Think about your idea. If it still bugs you a week later, think about it some more. If it bugs you a month later, maybe do something. When I started my company 7 years ago, no one told me that. So my reason for starting was completely different. I got lost at Disney World on a family trip. We walked into the theme park in Florida. My family and brother came up to me with this gigantic printed theme park map. And I was like, I hope I don't have to carry this. This is so annoying to have this stupid piece of paper. And I spent the next day just thinking about how much better it would be if there was a Google Maps for Disney World. And it was more of an epiphany. And then the more I kind of thought about it, the airport, the shopping mall, the convention center, the hospital, everywhere I looked, I saw that same problem. And I had no idea what we were going to do. I have a chemical engineering background, never done anything with GIS or maps or software. But it just bugged me that the world had to go indoors. So sometimes you just get this gut feel. And I was 20, I could take whatever risks at the time. You just have to find something that just bugs you all the time, and sometimes just make a bet and go for it.
Okay. Anybody else wants to add anything?
Go ahead.
I'll move to the next question.
I was just going to say, it sounds like one of the startup essentials you need to have, especially if you're married, is a very supportive wife. And so for those who may not have that or have that risk profile, make sure that you've checked in with all your significant others about what you're about to do.
Nina, anything?
Yeah, I guess some of it is about, it's not a bad word to say pivot. It's a nice way to say you thought something. The most important thing is you validated it. So, there's a guy who has this book, actually he's an ex-Google guy, called Prototyping, where basically, can you test something before you actually have to build it? And these days, to raise money, it depends on your own personal situation, but most people want some evidence that it's just not you and your friends who think this is a great idea. So everything you can do to get evidence and then pivot till you get to something that really, really is going to have lasting value. That's kind of the startup game. Can you do that enough before you die of exhaustion, lack of money, or you have no more friends or spouse or whatever disaster ensues? But that's actually the startup thing, is you're kind of iterating to figure out there's a space, you realize it's important, but is your offering the right thing for this space? And it's really figuring that out. So don't believe that what you start with, that you're all knowing and all valuable, because there's annoying things like users that have other ideas. And there's customers that have other ideas. And so you kind of have to figure out what they really want and what are they willing to pay for. And then you can go from there.
Okay. So we just talked about in terms of ideation, right? So how do we get an idea that we might gravitate towards and hold on to it? Let's move on to the next thing, which is most of us then introspect a little bit and say, hey, wait a minute. Am I the kind of business leader who can be a CEO or a founder? Do I have it in me to run this type of business? I have a chemical engineering background. Can I really do it? So let's ask the panel, how do you determine that? How do you determine if you have it in you to be the leadership of a startup? So, Hooman, you want to start?
I think the way that I look at it is, first of all, one of the reasons there's that encouragement to go through it is because going through this entrepreneurial journey is a process of self-discovery. You will find out more about yourself and what makes you tick, what helps you be a good individual contributor, and then as an individual, and then a leader of a team. That maybe you'll learn more about what are your strengths and weaknesses in the area. And then the other part of it is a little bit of the self-awareness that sometimes you may be a subject matter expert. You may also be the founder with the passion of the idea, but you may not be the one who can actually get the right team together. Or if you believe that needs to be somebody who is going to be in the forefront doing the selling. I think you will know if you're a good leader for this if you have that self-awareness to even be able to step back and say, you know what, maybe it's not my point. I want to do this and I can make this successful, but maybe it's not my job to be necessarily the CEO of the company. By the way, I don't know. When my company, we have a team of 3. What's really a CEO? I mean, at the end of the day, you're all bunch of product managers. Get over the ego and just make it happen. Work together and figure it out. So put the ego aside in the beginning too. That's the other thing that if you can do, then you have the qualities to be the leader. And believe me, I learned from my first startup, I lacked many of those qualities. I learned a lot about a lot of my weaknesses as a leader and things that I continue to work on to be a better leader in the future.
Anybody else? So the question is, how do I know I have it in me to be part of the leadership team that can run a business?
I think, to sort of echo what Hooman said, it is a lot of it comes down to having that self-awareness, some amount of self-awareness, and also the maturity to be able to say, you know what, this isn't the role I need to play. Sometimes, I think everyone who thinks they want to try it should give it a go. Everyone should try to start something if they want to. But it's also important, as we talked earlier, to fail fast. So if you find yourself not being able to raise around, not being able to hire people because you can't inspire them too, even though you have something that you think is absolutely game-changing, then I think it is important that you realize that and not just get frustrated with yourself, but say, I need someone to complement me, and be able to find that person and convince them that you've got what it takes to make the product succeed, and you need someone to help hire, or you need someone to help sell, or you need someone to help fundraise. And even at the largest companies today, sometimes the best seller isn't the CEO. The CEO just has to know how to put the pieces together. The face of Google, very rarely these days, is Larry Page. Right? And in the government front, it's Eric Schmidt. In the product front, it's Sundar Pichai. On the sales side, it's Omid. Larry's just making sure the team chugs along. And for many years, that's what he did. Sometimes he comes out of water, he makes his appearances, he makes his statements, shares his vision, but he knows what it takes to make that company, even at that scale, succeed and grow. So if you have a dream to start something, you should, but also realize what you need around you to succeed and be able to say, I'm not everything.
Okay. Anybody else wants to add?
So I started without any money. I quit my job and said, I want to do this. And so being poor can be a blessing. Is this so exciting that somebody wants to work for no pay? Do they really, do they enjoy working with you enough that they'll just do it because they think the vision is so compelling that they want to do it? So there's 3 co-founders. I started first, 2 came along. They worked with me for a long time before they got any pay. And so the great thing about a startup is you can't bribe anybody with a salary at the beginning, right? A lot of people go to jobs they don't really like, but they like getting a paycheck. The startup doesn't give you that. So you better like it at the beginning. And if you're lucky enough to be funded from day one, fine. But I think the startup, there are so many ups and downs that you have to be willing to take lower pay, higher risk, because something about the idea, what you're trying to do, and the quality of the team, I really think that you should be building the kind of company that you would go to every day for free. Because you want to work with these people because the mission is so exciting that you want to do it. That's the kind of people that are going to make your startup succeed, that passion, that drive. And you can see it. So we have an audition process in our company. People come in, they just work with us informally. Some of them are amazing, they're great, and they stay, and they're in. Other people, it sounded like fun, and then it's way too much work or harder than they think, and they don't last very long, and that's fine. I mean, it's great to figure out what works for you, and maybe in a year they want to come do it. But there's no harm, no foul. But I really think that to make a startup work, it's not a comfortable situation for the CEO. Every day you're asking yourself, are you crazy, and are you inspiring other people to leap off of a cliff with you? Right? You need to care enough about your people that you're concerned about that, and making progress. It really is your failing when you don't make progress. It's your fault if you have the wrong person in the role. So you have to be willing to sort of accept that, and again, go back to pivot. You have to pivot on your own capabilities as well as the product.
Okay, great. So let's move to, so we talked about ideation, then we talked about also introspecting about, do I really have it in me? Let's move to the third topic, which is, okay, I'm in, but I need to get other people in as well. So now the question is about co-founders. So the question is, how much more difficult is it to build a startup with just a single founder versus having perhaps 2 or 3 founders? So Ankit, you want to start?
I think the first test of an idea is whether you can inspire someone else to join you. So I think absolutely you got to bring on at least one co-founder. Startups are very long, tricky, annoying, hard, difficult, painful. You do want someone else or 2 or 3 other people with you along for the ride right from the beginning. I remember when I look back to when we started, we actually, when I was recruiting co-founders, I actually gave them 2 options. I said, put in a little bit of money, like 10, 20K in that range, so that we have some seed money. Show your commitment, buy your co-founder title, or join as like an early employee. You get a couple points in the company. And I think that really sent, the message to them was, join, I want you on the team, but you choose your role. How committed do you want to be? Do you want to be a co-founder, or do you want to be an early employee? And in the end, when you've got an idea and you've got something in PowerPoint or maybe a mock-up or slides, the first real test on whether you have something that can change the world is whether you can convince one other person to join your ride.
So I'm going to share probably my biggest mistake that I made as a founder of my company. First, I did exactly as Ankit said, and I thought and I agree. If your idea can attract somebody to join you, then you've got something that has merit. And I followed that. And in fact, my co-founder was willing to put money into it. And I even gave him the title of CEO because I knew he had more experience than me. Here's where I made the mistake. At one point, about 9 months after we got started, he started to do another startup. And my biggest mistake was, at that point, I did not go and say, okay, you know what? Exactly as Ankit said, now your role has changed. Now you want something different than I want. Now you need to step out of the role of the CEO. We can bring somebody in, and you can do your other startup. You can still have interest in this company, but you can't be a CEO of 2 different startups at the same time. Biggest mistake that I made, paid for it dearly for the next 6 months, because we went through a potential great acquisition opportunity with Walgreens that fell through because I did not resolve that issue when it came up. So be careful with your co-founders. Great to have them, but the role that Ankit suggested is very essential for you to make very, very clear on the onset and be able to pivot on it depending on how the situation in your startup is growing.
I think the key there is minority co-founders, not majority co-founders.
So, yes, completely agree. Now, I think in the first or second class that we had in our batch of SLP, there was a speaker named Nikhil Jagathar that came in. He's done a few companies. His latest one is called ViewClip. Some of you guys might have heard of it. But he gave a very interesting piece of advice. It's contrary to what both of you guys have said, and probably contrary to the way you did your startup. But what he said was, there's a difference between a title of co-founder and the emotions and mentality of a true co-founder. And the difference is the following. If someone was part of creating the vision together, then they are mentally and emotionally co-founders. They understand what it takes to conceive that idea. If someone was given the title of co-founder because you needed them for a role, then what they really are an executor, an early member of the team who you're bribing with a title to come join you. And it's important to know the difference between the two. Someone who joins at the conception of the idea, you wouldn't worry about minority co-founders. Someone who you bribe to bring into the team with a title, and I use the word bribe very loosely here, so don't, no negative connotations. I actually think it's in some cases it's very justified because they have a nice stable job at a high flying company, and they need a title which is a step up for them to take that risk of no pay or little pay to come join you. So you give them this co-founder title, but mentally they will run away when either they're not as excited anymore or they find a new shiny object, or when things are really bad, because all of those will happen at some point. A true co-founder, the mental and emotional co-founder, is so tied to that idea that they're not going to waver in, should I consider something else? But someone who you bring in will say, well, that looks kind of nice. If this sounds like relationships or having children, it's because it's very much like that. That distinction you need to know when you talk to somebody else. Are they in it for the title, or are they in it for the vision? And give them equity in the right way. If they are an equal co-founder, it is much harder to part ways with them, which is why you really want to make sure they're an emotional co-founder. If they're a title co-founder, then you want to stay in control so that when stuff goes bad, you have that control and you can make the decisions that are best for your idea, for your vision. And so you can make sure your dreams succeed. But remember, what I was saying there was your dreams, your vision, not you, both of you or three of you. So there's still this distinction, and realizing that early and being able to act on that later is going to be key in any co-founder relationship.
Okay. Ankit, that's a very shrewd point, because I had co-founders who bought their title, and within a couple years they were out. And I think to your point, they weren't emotionally invested in the company. They were in it for either a career move or for some other reason. But it works out. It worked out for me. I needed some really heavyweight folks who had been around in the industry for 20 years, who, because I was 20, they were 45. So they were able to bring a lot of credibility. I was able to use them. They were able to use me. It was a very we played off each other very well, but it wasn't a lifetime, we're best friends forever type thing, right? You have to really, when you're starting a company, you have to really get into, not just for your co-founders, but for your team members, really get into their psyche on what is their core motivation. And in the end, you got to take advantage of it, not in a negative way, but take advantage of what's driving them so that you can move your vision forward.
Okay. All right, good. So let's move on to the next question, which is about just how do you hire into your team now that you're past your co-founder decision? You've got what else do you need to look for to make sure you're successful? So what are your tips to the team on how are you going to hire? What are you going to look for in these early employees?
I think the first hires all come from the people you already know. So I don't think we ever did a Craigslist ad, or I don't think we've ever hired an executive recruiter or any recruiting firm for that matter. It's all been through who do we know, who have we worked with before, who kind of comes through the network. And for a lot of people, I think to your point, Nina, earlier, we had people join, especially in the early days, they had their full-time job, and the early employee would typically come in the evening, come for maybe an hour, a couple days a week, after work, 6 to 7, do something, maybe work on the weekend for a couple months. And then once they saw where the company was going, once they contributed a little bit, we pulled them in full time. It was kind of a slow entry to again, you're trying to bribe them to come in for, free lunch and less salary, right? So you got to convince them, give them what the environment looks like, kind of tease them into it over the course of a couple weeks, especially in the earliest of the days. Later on, once the company is 7, 8, 10 people, then you probably go through more of a formal process in hiring. But I think the people you've worked with in the past, who the team knows, is the best way to get started.
So my first three hires were friends of friends. One of them, two of them came friends of SLP friends, and then the fourth hire came through AngelList, fifth one through Hire.com, sixth one through an executive recruiter, seventh one was my college roommate, and then eighth one was a friend of a friend. Just to kind of give an idea of as you grow, you start. And after the second one is when we got our round of funding. So now I could pay for a Hire.com referral fee or an executive recruiter, what their fees are. But it was always about finding the best talent. So you look everywhere, your network, your friends' networks, Facebook, AngelList, LinkedIn, anywhere you can, as well as paid sources as well.
So we were lucky in terms of my experience working in this area for a while. I had a lot of volunteers. So I was really lucky that we didn't have a lot of money at the beginning at all. We didn't raise money we self-funded for a year and a half. So I had a lot of people say, I want to help. And people say, this sounds so cool, I want to help. Because it's so fun to be part of a startup, they think, at the beginning anyway. So I would say, well, here's a job. Can you do that? And somebody would say, oh yeah, I could do that. And so I had one guy who was doing some stuff for me, and he was actually on assignment in Germany. He's like, oh yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that on the weekend. So you get help, and I need very special technical computer vision and imaging work done that I knew people in that space, and they'd say, yeah, I want to do that. I had one guy we talked to for like 5 times, and he said he wanted help, but then he never really delivered. I think he wanted us to pay him more than we really wanted to. So you just, at the beginning, you get things for free, and you see who comes out and who wants to do that. Some people are doing things for free because they want to actually be part of the team, and it gives them a chance to work with you, and you give them small jobs that they can do easily. If they're into it, then you give them bigger and bigger jobs, and then pretty soon you get to the point where you can start paying people, and then you get bigger people on. When you have more money, then we look for people outside through our network, and who do you know who's good, who'd be willing to do it, because it's not the salary that's going to attract them. We just can't pay a salary that's competitive with other things. So we found people through friends and friends. One of my co-founders came through 2 levels of friends who were very close, and we hit it off really well, and it was easy to have him come as a co-founder. But in every case, we have the people do an audition. We give them a simple project, then we give them a bigger project. Hiring mistakes are expensive. It's really easy to work with people informally and have them do little projects to see if they like you, if you like them. It's a good sorting mechanism, because if you hire somebody and bring him in the team and you say, this is Joe, he's going to be here and we're going to be best friends forever, and a month later you're like getting rid of Joe, everybody feels terrible. Everybody does. So we try to bring in people and just have them work for a little while and not call it a hire for a while if we can, just because it's so painful for people. When there's only 5 of you and you show someone the door, it's hard to do, and they say, you hire a stranger, you fire a friend. It's even worse when there's just 5 of you there, so.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to ask them the last question, and then we'll go into a little bit of a different trajectory. So the last question is, I'm going to ask each one of them to tell us potentially 1 or 2 mistakes or errors or whatever you want to call them, the pitfalls, which they can think about in their history of their startup, which they can share with us. So we want to start with Hooman?
We'll be here all night.
1 or 2.
Okay, you know what? I'll give you. Well, I already shared one with you, but I'll share one other piece to it that I think plays into this, which is when you find your co-founders, and you will know you found the right co-founder, is if you can have the following conversation with them on one of the early times, when you can really have a conversation around death, divorce, and dissolution of your company. If you guys can really sit around a table and have that honest conversation, and by death, by the way, I'm talking the real one, not a fake death of the company, because who knows? But if you can have that kind of an honest conversation with your co-founders, you have found some people. Of course, everything around the vision of the company, totally, I agree with everything that was said, but it just makes a big difference for me. The other thing, I could have done 1,000 things differently and done better. I'll probably do hundreds of those things in the future and get another 1,000 things wrong. But one thing that that will always stay with me is if you're doing something that you're passionate about, that you love doing, it doesn't matter if it's your own company, if it's you're working for somebody else. As if you really have that passion, the rest of it will come. The rest of it will be a joyful journey, a learning experience that you'll walk out of and without any regret whatsoever. So that is my biggest takeaway from what I went. And I went through a journey, and I didn't see the scale of what I had envisioned until I joined eBay as an employee. And I joined them, and I was recruited for exactly what I had done for my startup, and I scaled it there. And it became an amazing, exactly what I had envisioned. I didn't care that, this is no longer my startup, or I didn't get equity for this. I saw my vision. And that was more than enough that no dollar sign could have satisfied it. Well, my wife may have felt differently about it, but a separate story. But that's the part that I think is the biggest thing for me is if you're doing something that you're really, really passionate about, the rest of the journey will take care of itself.
There's so many mistakes over the years, but the phrase that always comes to mind for me is, when do you want to rock the boat? So my co-founder and I always, whenever we had a problem, we'd say, okay, we know what we have to do. When do you want to rock the boat? Because being in a startup means you're putting yourself in a position where you have really no leverage on day one. You have no money, you have very little credibility, you've got really nothing. So in that situation, everyone can take advantage of you. Your employees can take advantage of you. Your customers can ask for the meanest licensing terms. Your investors can take advantage of you in meetings. You really have nothing. You have no leverage. So my co-founder and I would always say, well, this guy on the team isn't working now. We got to let him go. Like, we knew it, right? And the question always comes up. When do you want to rock the boat? When do you want to make the change? Do you want to make it this month? Well, if you do it now, we've got this new release coming out. What's going to be impacted? Do you want to wait 3 months? Do you want to wait 6 months? The decision is already made. The boat will be rocked. It's just a question of when. And we struggled with that for so many years because it's just a function of leverage. You raise $5 million, you've got all the leverage in the world. An employee pisses you off, you move on. You get someone else who can do the job. But when you're in a position when you have less leverage, you have to be very careful to time everything carefully. So looking back, I think whatever mistakes we've made over the years, it's probably we just didn't rock the boat soon enough. Now, it was a calculated decision, but we probably could have saved some time. We probably could have moved on from a person 6 months earlier, or we could have done something differently. Just rock the boat a little bit earlier. Not too early, you'll kill your company, but a little bit earlier. Okay, Ankit.
Completely agree with that one. It's so easy to think about, man, if I let go of someone at the wrong time, how is that going to affect me? It's a question that's actually very hard to answer. It's very easy to talk about in retrospect or even talking about it hypothetically, but when you're in that situation, it's because you just think about how it's going to affect day-to-day practical things. So I had something very weird happen, and I talk about co-founders a lot because I bribed someone into being a co-founder, and we were raising our round, and the night before we were signing papers, I had to split ways with him, and he left. So imagine the day you're signing with all your investors, you go to them and say, oh, by the way, during pitching, I was telling you about this co-founder. He's not there anymore. That night was probably one of the roughest nights I've had since I started Quettra. And I was just shitting in my pants about what they were going to say, whether they were going to invest, and whether I had to, after 3-4 weeks of just selling this grand vision of a Google exec leaving and starting a company, and we're going to change the world. And I have a great co-founder selling the co-founder, because when you have a team, you sell the team, and you're convincing them why it's not just you, it's somebody else as well, and suddenly they're gone. And at that time, it seemed like the biggest mistake, and life was going to kind of stop. One of my investors at Google Ventures told me, are you still going to have the same vision? You started the company, you brought him on. Are you still going to do the same thing? And I said, absolutely. That's why I left my job. That's why I wanted to do something, and I think this thing has legs. And I'm never going to forget that he said, well, if you're going to do it, and we told you we were going to support that vision, people come, people go, it's okay. And the thing I realized at that point, that even though something seems like a mistake, even though things seem like they can completely change your world, it's better that someone leaves you sooner rather than later, and because you can move on and you can make the changes, you can make the pivots, you can surround yourself with 3 people instead of that one co-founder that then complement you to then hopefully go out and succeed. I think it's still very early for our company, but to say how we've done. But it's it was one of those moments where I said everyone makes mistakes, everyone feels like they're making mistakes, but the most important thing is to figure out how you're going to work around the mistakes and just move forward.
Okay, Nina?
So I think getting in front of customers, if you're doing business deals, getting in front of users as early as possible with as raw a vision as you want. You always think you're going to make it better and it's going to look better, and then I'll show it to them and they're going to just find it irresistible. But I've learned so much working with users, and so the earlier you can get involved with users and react and pivot and getting involved with businesses to figure out, like, is this the right product? Is it going to match them? So as soon as you can possibly do that. People always think, I've got to invest in this technology first. You don't always have to do that. So any introductions, any way you can get to that customer development process, do that as soon as you can. It is your largest risk area. And so the closer in you could get onto mitigating that within a time horizon that you can execute is really important. And then the other thing I would say about the journey and lessons is just try to leave yourself open for growth. Like, whatever happens, don't think everything is the end of the world. Just say, well, that was a piece of learning, but actually learn from it, because everything is about bumps, and it's about just responding to the roughness of the road and making transitions and stuff. So there aren't that many things that are fatal. What is kind of fatal is being stuck to one thing. So while you have to set the vision and keep everything going, you're also trying to respond to information. So again, you're responding to users, you're responding to businesses. Keep that open, and also distinguish between, is this a lifestyle project that you want to nurture, this little fantasy that you have that you don't want to expose to the real market because that would be painful? Or are you doing this as a business? And if you're doing it for a business, you really want to validate as soon as you can, is this really solving a problem? Are people willing to solve it, and are they willing to pay for it? So distinguish between lifestyle opportunity. We all read in the press about somebody who's obsessed about an area and they end up being a billionaire. Well, those are rare. That's why they make great press. So try to really figure out if this is just going to be a hobby or if it's going to be a business. And if it's a business, ultimately the investors want to recoup their investment. So always remember, it's a business thing that you're trying to create.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned to you, I'd like to do a little bit of a shift in trajectory, and we'll come back to the Q&A, but these Q&As will come from you guys. So now you should start thinking about any questions you have. But I'm going to take a few minutes now to just focus a little bit on this startup leadership program, okay? So just like, we talked about Machu Picchu, and I'm sure Ankit did some preparation work. I've also done that hike. But there's a lot of prep work when you go on a big journey. The SLP helps you prepare for the startup journey. That's probably the best nutshell description, saying it's a very structured program that goes between 16 to sometimes 20 weeks, depending upon the specific chapter. And they talk through, every week about a specific topic, all right? So I'm going to touch on a few things here, just kind of explain to you how SLP is structured. SLP is structured. So first of all, the members themselves, there's fellows, SLPs, so all of us over here. There's some of them in the audience. So the first person I have to point out is Everett, who's in that corner. He drove down from San Francisco for this event through horrible traffic. I did the same when he had a similar event in San Francisco. This kind of shows you some of the partnership and the peering that we have. So he's the program lead in San Francisco. And both of our chapters work very collaboratively. So sometimes they have a different set of speakers, we have a different set of speakers, and we actually travel up and down to our individual chapters, okay? There's a few other folks, Carlos, who's sitting over there. If you can raise your hand, Carlos. So he's one of our SLP fellows. Over here on my right, there are 3 of my co-PLs or co-program leads. I'm the program lead for the next year for Silicon Valley. But Nawa, Maitrik, and Prithviraj are 3 co-PLs. If you guys can just get up, guys. Their email addresses are here on the screen. Am I missing anybody from our SLP fellow list? I hope not. Okay, I have 3 other co-PLs also. A couple of them are traveling, but we have, what that means is, for 25 sort of students, if you would, or SLP candidates, there is a lot of interaction that's happening between the different folks that are helping out with the agenda, with the person who's the CEO of a certain class, et cetera, okay? So the other thing I want to mention to you is SLP is a non-profit organization. It's headquartered in Boston, but it's actually a non-profit, and it only charges a fee of $525 in the US. If you can go to the previous slide, Maitrik, if you don't mind, I can tell you some of the details about SLP. So we have 26 cities in 12 different countries. There are 2,200 alumni members. We talked a little bit about sort of networking with them. So when we want to get information on a different chapter from a different country, we can network with these folks, and they give us information about that area. So whether that's China, whether that's Japan, whether that's Europe and London, we have those different cities covered. So that global network is extremely useful when you're trying to validate your concept, saying, might it work in Singapore? Perhaps let me try that, and then you reach out to somebody over there. 0% equity, there is one of the things that we're trying to do is create a lot more diversity. We already have 400 women in the SLP today as alumni members, but we want to actually create that, increase that number quite a bit more. There's been excellent exits off some of the companies, but also in terms of money that's been raised, at least $450 to $500 million has been raised by these companies that have been part of the program. So let me talk a little bit about sort of some of the topics we discuss, all right? So that gives you a flavor. I intentionally wanted to do this here where we talked about pitfalls or mistakes you made. That's a very important hallmark of the SLP, the SLP community, where you're very, you can discuss where you're failing in a very honest and a very safe environment. There's no embarrassment saying I'm having this problem or my co-founder just quit or what happened, right? So this is something where you're always walking in knowing that somebody out there understands your specific issue. It's not like you're going into folks who had hundreds of millions of dollars of exits and they're going to look at you and saying, great, but I'm already past that stage. These folks are actually going through some of these challenges as you're going through them as well. So there's a lot of networking and peer mentoring, if you would, that happens literally class after class. I can still remember after we finished our classes at 9 o'clock, we'd be sitting outside in the parking lot up to 10:30 at night, just talking about our issues and discussing things. There's a lot of energy that comes with. So the topics, okay, so co-founder conflict is one entire class. Just one class discusses co-founder conflict. Then negotiating a term sheet is another class. Struggles of a CEO, that's yet another class. The valuation, funding, team building. These are all different topics that get discussed. I'm not even talking about things like the legal aspects. There's a whole class on the legal aspects of how to do a startup. So there are all these different topics that have been picked, and we walk through in a very structured way, one after another. And the speakers that we invite, even though they may have a very large, broad skill set across multiple topics, we actually coach them to say, can you speak about this one topic only? Because this session, we are going to discuss this topic. This is what the folks are coming in for. So that's an important part. Then finally, I think, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is a very highly selective program, but I certainly want to encourage each one of you to apply and have an interview with any one of the co-PLs or the SLP fellows and ask some of your questions about what is in this program. It is a 4 to 5 month commitment. So to me, it's not the $525. It's really your time commitment that you're giving to it, because you'll get out of it what you put into it. And in many cases, you'll find other folks, like perhaps your co-founder, perhaps your next employee might come out of that community. But they're all like-minded folks, and that's really what I've enjoyed. Okay, so with that, I will pause, and now I will shift it over back to you guys and say, you've heard us talk about some of the issues around entrepreneurship, what are the pitfalls, what are the essentials about startups, and you've also heard about SLP. Now, if we can take some questions, we have a mic here. I can hand it out to the first person who has a question, and then we can go around. And with that, by the way, before we get to that, so I wanted to make sure there's a sign-up sheet that's going around. So do you guys have a sign-up sheet that you can please circulate around and make sure everybody's names and addresses are on that? Okay, is that fair? All right, so we have a first question. Okay, great, thanks. Please announce your name. Tell us what your startup is like. What are you guys working on, and ask us the question.
My name is Abhijit. I don't have a startup yet. I have a bunch of I have an idea which I want to evangelize and take it further. I'm also taking 101 entrepreneurship in the Thai program, so I'm trying to get my hands dirty and start ahead. So my question is, how vocal can you be about your idea? Did you ever feel that your idea could be stolen by someone if you start talking to them?
Definitely, your idea can be stolen, but your execution probably can't. And hopefully, the execution is what makes you different and is what's going to make you succeed. And I think everybody on the panel was talking about pivoting. So the idea you start with, you're going to keep morphing it based on what you learn. So the faster you execute, the more efficiently you execute, the more likely you are to exit and succeed and keep going.
If I could just ask one more question, probably. I've heard mixed opinion about you putting your own money at risk in the startup. So what is your opinion about that? I mean, I heard people say that you should not put your money because that involves your emotion and you cannot concentrate on it. And few people say that, no, that's against it, like you put your risk. So just probably answer on both.
My dad always said, play with other people's money.
It depends what the money is for. If it's to hire somebody, then yes, try to get someone else's money. Don't pay salaries with your own money. But if it's to pay for some, I don't know, Amazon credits or just to get your prototype or vision started, luckily the cost of most of those things, unless you're in health tech or something that has a lot of upfront cost, most costs for infrastructure and cloud have gone down. So you can probably front a couple of $1,000 without too much risk.
There's so much stuff out there for free. Like, it's ridiculous. Even back in 2008 when we started, we joined the Sun Startup Essentials program, and they gave us a $20,000 server for free, and then they forgot about it. It's still sitting in my data center powering my data factory. Like, you can get, as long as you just mingle in the right groups of big corporate companies, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they've got all these programs, they'll throw credits and credits your way. You'll for the first 1 or 2 years, you should be able to get a lot of free stuff.
Thanks.
If I can add a little bit to that answer around the first part of your question, Abhijit, you asked the question about how important is the idea itself, and I think that's a very critical mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs make. My experience is we get stuck to the idea so much. You have to distinguish between the idea and the passion you have for the idea. As Ankit mentioned, it's easy to steal the idea, but it's hard to steal the passion that you have for the idea. So by sharing the idea, actually, some of your passion is showing through and you're actually getting feedback, which is very critical in terms of the morphing of where it's going to go. And I think that's more valuable than worrying about, I'm going to guard my idea. So I know an entrepreneur who says, I'm going to patent it first before I do anything. And I said, but it may not go anywhere. And you're going to wait all that time. And I think one of the very easy mistakes we all make, and I've made that, is I got stuck with the idea. I said, you know what? And actually, I would have gotten that feedback sooner. I would have pivoted faster, and I would have been in a better spot now. But we all make that mistake. So hopefully, if you make that mistake, you come out of it faster than maybe at least I did. Okay.
One other thing might be, and Nina mentioned something about it, getting in front of customers early. You don't necessarily need to get in front of customers or anybody with idea. Get in front of them about the pain point. Get in front of them about the problem that you're trying to solve. Find out how they see the problem. Do they see it the same way? Because it's not about, if you understand that part very well, then your idea may just be the starting point, the point of inception of how you're going to solve it. But the more you understand the problem, the better you can find the ultimate service that you're going to launch. So think about that. The other one that I want to ask the panel, you talked about emotional investment if you put in your money. Money or not, how much emotionally were you invested in your startup? I think it's all your emotion. Doesn't matter if you're putting a dime in there or $1 million of your own cash. You're all in. I'm sorry to say this.
That's true. You're all in. I mean, at the end, you're putting your name on something, right? Your reputation comes in, and people know you for what you've been doing. I wanted to add a comment there on when you talk about, the hardest part is figuring out who do you want to share your ideas with in an effort to make the idea stronger. And the way I think about it these days is I try to find a way to kill the idea quickly. So the first person I go to is my younger brother. He's a tech geek. So if I have an idea about something, whether it's for my work or just another random startup idea, see, the problem these days is that there's too many ideas. I need to kill them quickly and move on to the next one. So I go to my brother first, and I'll kind of brainstorm with him for 15, 20 minutes. He'll poke a few holes. And then I've got my list of 10, 12 friends who I know who can help kind of poke more holes. The idea is challenge it as much as you can, and then see if you can build it back up, so that those fundamental assumptions about that concept become really strong, right? If that foundation is strong, then as you pivot or as you learn from other people, you can make minor adjustments, but your fundamentals have to be very good, and you want to get advice from your trusted folks to make it strong.
Okay, next question.
Hi, my name is Satish. I had a failed experience with a startup as a product manager and then backend. So I have ideas that I want to build, right? So my fear has been, how do you validate the commercial success or the success of I know you're passionate about the product, it comes back to you like months after month, but how do you validate the commercial success or the success of the product? And one thing you mentioned is the customer validation, but how do you kind of like balance in terms of the passion with the potential for that idea to be successful? What's your perspective on that?
So I have a family friend who has been doing startups for quite a while. And the thing he always does is he leaves his current job, starts a company, once he has someone who says, I'll pay you if you build that. And that's one way to kind of, so he gives his ideas out. He talks to people. He normally does that pretty quietly because it might conflict with his job, or there could be IP questions about when you came up with the idea. But he validates it before he even leaves his job and says, can you find someone who will pay for it? And he just recently left. So his last startup was bought for a bunch of money. Worked through his handcuffs there. Was thinking about his next idea. He left 2 months later. I was catching up with him, and he said, "Yeah, I just started this new thing, and we already have 3 customers ready to pay." In some ways, that's a mistake I guess I can say I've made as well. I wish I had done that sooner rather than later. But I think depending on the kind of idea, if it's a B2B idea, that is definitely something you can do. You can go throw it out, especially your customers. They're not most likely going to build your vision, your passion. So throw it out there and say, will you pay for it? And if they say yes, and some people even act like they've already built it. And this is something that's taught in business schools, where you build a website which looks like it has the product, it has a sign-up form, and once you sign up and you say submit and give me the product, it says this was just a test. When we're ready, we'll come give it. They want to see who makes it that far. They even spend advertising dollars to see if they can drive traffic to the site and see how the funnel looks, just to validate the idea. So there's many things you can do to see whether the idea has commercial success. If you're doing a consumer product, a consumer mobile application, or a consumer website, that's very different. I think in that case, you have to kind of build it and see whether it sticks. And there, it's all about iteration and finding something that just works.
These days, a lot of people talk about the minimal viable product and kind of getting something out quickly that you can test. And I think the biggest mistake I see is there's 3 words: minimal viable product. People forget the viable part. So they make a minimal product and it doesn't go anywhere. And then they get frustrated. And then, then they get caught in this position where they've worked on something for 3 months or 6 months and they're stuck. They may have already left their job, but they're not seeing where the revenue is going to come from. So if you're building an MVP, that viable word is really important. You got to test your assumptions and make sure the product makes sense.
There's an important part of the startup experience, at least I'll tell you share mine, is when you're passionate about the idea, you are so stuck with it as opposed to evaluating, as you're asking, the commercial success of it, right? If you are in this thing to make some money, at least to feed your family, whatever, you have to make it commercially successful. But then on the other hand, you're being tugged by the fact that I think this ought to work because I know it is, right? So I think part of this is where there is this fine balance between being so passionate about the idea you're trying to drive because you believe this is going to make an impact, but at the same time being flexible with it as it needs to be tweaked to make it the commercial success it ought to be, right? So I mean, it's such a fine balance. It's an art where you could be pulled into just saying, I'm going to get stuck with the idea, but then you're just going from idea to idea to idea and never making a successful, commercially, successful product. On the other hand, you have to kind of always be flexible to say, I want to make sure this thing is also critical, and some of the tools described here, right?
Let me add one more comment. As I'm thinking about this minimal viable product thing, the other thing you have to look for is signals on what people are telling you. And for us, we were doing indoor maps at a time when no one else was anywhere close to thinking about indoor maps. The world was still trying to navigate you from home to the airport. And I remember, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but I met with Apple in 2009. And for me to get my deal with them took me 5 years. So every year they tease me with something. They'd say, oh, give me this, give me that. But it was like a signal that what we're doing is interesting. They're going to need it. It was like this inevitability that what we're doing is important. It was just a matter of surviving long enough. So you just have to look for even if a customer says no or later, you have to look for those signals on, like, how is the world going to play out? And then make a bet on whether you can survive long enough or not.
Okay. Next question. Let's go to that end over there.
Hi, I'm Prashant. I'm with Ecomukti. Essentially, what we do is we believe in gifting experiences to kids, either your time or skill as well, rather than a material thing. What I wanted to check with you is how important is the name and branding? And is there a time where you feel that you really need to change it? Or is it better to just go with it and make sure that you get the customers on?
We actually experimented with 2 different brand names. And one of my co-founders is in New York, and he has friends that work for Interbrand and are in PR agencies. So he went around with 2 branding things that we put together, and he just had lunch with a bunch of people. And then it just was like everybody was very obviously on one and not on the other. So don't be afraid to work on your brand and also change it. You have to have something to start with. And we use 99 designs to create different logos and stuff. But you could do a survey with people and see which one they like. You can give people a brand and ask them, what kind of a company do you think it is? So do focus on that and think that it's important. But trust people. Like when you show it to people, don't be so excited about it that you can't listen to them. But if you have people who have branding experience and PR and press and stuff like that, show it to them. You'll get so much information. And we changed ours at one point. We had 2 different ones going on. So definitely test that, because once you start to get anything known, it's harder to change your brand. So now you can change it every day. You can change your website all the time, but definitely do look at it.
Right.
Just to add to that, so when we were coming up with the brand for Quettra, so we knew the name. It was a $3.99 domain that I found for a word that had no meaning, and that's why I decided to pick it. And I wanted the letter Q, and I said, just like we're going to make meaning out of a lot of data, I want to make meaning of a name and give, so that people know what Quettra means in the long term. That was the story behind the name. But when it came to the logo and when it came to the taglines and the colors, we had a branding agency work with us. But one of the things a lot of branding agencies do is they give you a lot of recommendations. Go down this path because it's the trend. And it took a lot of work from me to push them back and say, give me 5 options. And I actually sent it out to all the SLP mailing lists and had people vote on colors on different options. And the feedback I got was very interesting, and it was actually very different than what the branding folks were even saying. And so the more you can get feedback, the more you can be flexible to listening to others and just go with what works. And the feeling branding is all about feeling. We're doing something with a lot of data from mobile phones, so we wanted to stay the hell away from the color red, because that's danger. We want everyone in the branding world will say blue is very cool these days. A lot of the successful companies are doing blue. My fiance hates the color orange, so that was out. There were little things like that came to be, and then within green, I learned that there are 1,000 shades, and which one really resonates. I just sent out a survey to SLP, and I got about 100 responses within a day. It was pretty fascinating. Or putting it on Facebook. All these things that you think that you need to personally decide, sometimes let others help you with that decision and give feedback.
I think a big part of branding these days is driven by the name of the company and what domain name is available. So one technique that I like, or one tip that I learned was get a random name in the beginning, and once you raise money or you have some traction, then buy a expensive domain name. But on day one, do not spend more than $10. I think a good example is Nitin Bhandari started Skyfire, but the original name of the company was dvclabs.com, which is, I'm sure, less than $8, right? So I think it's a matter of timing, I think, on on day one, whether you need it or whether you can, again, consumer, you probably need it on day one. On business to business, you can probably wait a little bit longer and brand when you have more resources available.
Okay. Let's go to this question here, and then I think one more person had a question on that end. So over here, I think in the front. Can you? Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Asad. I'm into fintech. I just wanted to find out, does SLP provide the mentor network, and SLP, do they provide, market validation and technology validation?
SLP itself does not provide.
No, the mentor network in SLP.
There is a mentor network, yeah. So basically, there is actually a whole session on it's speed dating with different mentors. So we have folks like what you see here on the panel come and visit the class, and then you get a chance to spend time with each one of them, 15 minutes or so, just telling them what you're doing. And then if there's a good match, then you can continue the relationship outside of class. And in many cases in our class, that did happen. So basically, a lot of the ex-fellows will come in, you chat with them, and if afterwards you connect with them. It doesn't restrict you just to those folks. Obviously, afterwards you can always reach out to anybody else and say, I need a little bit of help, some guidance. This is where I'm stuck. I heard you speak about this once somewhere in a class or something else, and then you can pick it up from there too. So yeah, there is a mentoring. One entire actually class is about mentoring, and so we get these folks and we discuss that. But on the other hand, it doesn't preclude you from actually going out after the fact as well. Okay.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
So I think that there's two parts of mentorship in SLP. One is the mentorship you get from all the other peers in the group. I think that is probably the most valuable part of mentorship that you get in SLP. The second one is kind of a hidden opportunity, which is when you are the CEO of whatever class, it's a good excuse to reach out to anybody in the valley, anybody in technology, anybody in any field, and say, I am part of this program, and we're looking for people to help us grow. And you have the brand of SLP behind you to reach out to anybody via anybody in the SLP network. So you can reach almost anybody in the world. And I can say that very confidently. But at that point, you get to start building a relationship with that person as the CEO of this class. And that conversation is not just, I want you to talk about X, Y, and Z at this class. Most of the time, the CEO of the class is having a coffee with that person, telling them about SLP, telling them about themselves, telling them why they reached out to that specific individual, and building a relationship. So you get the opportunity to find your mentors and also discover mentors that others bring into the class. So I think there's many different ways of finding mentors. And it goes back to being a CEO. You have to find opportunities every which way possible. And I think SLP just opens a lot of doors.
Yeah. Truly forces. Let me just pause. I think there was a question there. Was there a question in that end? Okay, probably not. Let's come back here. So go ahead. Sorry, I'll come to you in a minute. Yeah? So that person there, yeah.
This question is mainly for Ankit or anyone else that can relate. But coming from a chemical engineering background and doing a tech startup, what were some of the challenges you faced learning the technology, and how did you overcome those?
I learned everything I possibly could about maps right from the beginning. I made the first maps, and I think not being a software by training helped me, because the stuff we were trying to do, everyone else was saying, oh, it's too hard, it's going to take too long, it's too much effort to make an indoor map. And I kind of had to find a non-technical way to solve those problems first to show that it could be done in a reasonable way. So I think if I had a software background, I wouldn't be running a tech company, because I wouldn't have had that pain point or that desire to fix it. It would have been like, it's too hard. But I think when it came to starting the company, the first big decision I had to make, because I was in college at the time, was, do I want to hire friends who are in computer science programs in college, or do I want to bring on some folks who've been in software for a while? Because at the end, it's a software company. We need technical people. And that was a hard decision. I met folks on both sides. And I felt that a startup is just so risky. You need someone who can be a little bit more committed, who can give it a little bit more time. If there's a bump in the road, you don't want someone just to give up. And I felt that some of my college friends may not be as committed as someone who maybe came from the industry. So in the end, I knew from the beginning that what I could bring to the table was understanding why maps is important, how we could make the maps, and kind of in a way separate the software from the data. So I brought in the data side and was able to kind of network my way into friends and friends of friends to find the software help.
Okay. All right, question?
So I have kind of a question that might come across. It's probably a very initial question, might come across as somewhat naive, but I'm kind of at a point where I think I know I want to start something new, and maybe it goes to different situations where you guys were all at, but I'm working a full-time job. And I kind of need to work a full-time job to be able to survive. So kind of the question that I have is, like, how long, because obviously you need to be iterating on these ideas, you need to be getting out to your customers, talking to them, you're going to come up with new things, but is maybe a little bit of a sense, and it's probably a personal decision for everyone, on how, maybe when do you think is the right time to drop your full-time job to start this? And I'm assuming you need to at some point, so.
When you can say, I can take the risk, right? When you can say, I can go 6 months without money because I care about this more than money, and I haven't had to make hard decisions in that sense because my parents live here, and so when I quit my job at Google, my grandma was old. I wanted to spend time with her, so it was a good excuse to move back home. So I didn't have rent for a bit. The startup started out of my parents' house. My first couple of employees loved home cooked food every single day. That was what I could offer, not Google lunches. But the best time to leave is when you say, I want to risk it all for this thing. And that's something that comes, to each person at a different time. But there are real world practical considerations, like if you have to pay rent or if you have a visa that you need a job for, you have to figure out how that's going to work. I've had friends who are on an H-1B, and the only way they can start a company is for somebody to have a co-founder who can get funding and then transfer the H-1B to a company. So you have to trust somebody enough to start a company, incorporate it all in their name, and then hire you and come over, right? So every situation is very different.
Yeah. Let me just add a little bit to this also, because I think this is a dilemma a lot of us face. So what I did on my end, because I was working a fairly reasonably good job at a big company. So first thing I did was actually at TIE, I took a Raj Jaswal class, ESV 101, where he just explained what is entrepreneurship, and there was 6 weeks, continuous sessions. And I started to get an understanding of what startups are like, what is entrepreneurship like. Nothing that I had envisioned it to be in the big company at all. Now, in the big company that I was at, there was a lot of entrepreneurship things that I had been doing, and I was kidding myself that is really entrepreneurship, that is breakthrough innovation. That was all crap, nothing, okay? This is, when I started to listen to some of the speakers and what the things that they'd gone through, that got me excited enough to sign up for the following class that Raj had, which was ESV 201. And then after that, there was a similar session at TIE, and I signed up for the SLP class. And then halfway through the SLP class, I felt comfortable enough saying, this is how I'm going to define myself for the next 10 plus years. This is what I'm going to do. But having worked in a big company for a while, trust me, you get, or any company, there's a sense of comfort that's already been established, and it's hard to break free. And that's you've got to validate that feeling. It's not something you can neglect. But on the other hand, by doing some of these baby steps, you get to understand, this actually is a good way where you mingle with a lot of folks who are thinking like this, and you say, am I more like this or am I more like that, right? So now if somebody asks me, can you go back into the big company? And the answer is absolutely no. I cannot do it because I know what this world is like. And I like this world a lot more. But had I not gone through these steps, I would not have come to this point. Yeah. So
I think to build on that a little bit more, I think when you're working in a bigger company and you're thinking about doing a startup, I think that's a really good time where you can build a lot of the other kind of fundamental things you'll need when you make the jump into a startup. So, like, suppose you're thinking, I'm going to do a startup in the next 2 years. Well, in a sense, you may be working on it full time 2 years from now, but you can actually start on it today. You can do a lot of the other things. You can understand how, what's the difference between an S Corp and a C Corp? Do you have 10 technical friends who you can call up for advice? Do you know anyone in the Palo Alto, Sandhill community who would take a meeting from you? Can you call 5 VCs and schedule a meeting, right? Kind of build some of those relationships now so that when all the pieces line up for you, whether it's financially or immigration status or all the other stuff that you need to get ready, add a bunch of other stuff like this so that when you make the jump, you can really push everything at the same time. You can you know who your team is going to be, you know who your angel investors are going to be or who you're going to contact. You kind of know who your early customers might even be because you've socialized with them. You can do a lot of that work that may not be product work, but a lot of other stuff that'll accelerate you the moment you jump.
Okay. We're going to take, so Nina will talk next, but we're going to take that question in a second, but also I believe we're going to make another question from you after. Okay, so we're going to go ahead, Nina.
I just want to add, so my steps were that I had a team that was clamoring to do a startup and said, we will go with you, just get us out of here. And then I had people saying, why are you not doing a startup? Like, aren't you starting your startup? And then I had a friend just set me down. I'd launched a product and was going to go think what I'm going to do next. And she just said, would you just start this goddamn company already? And I was like, what? I'm like the last to know that I guess I'm supposed to do this. So I had a lot of friends around me watching how I worked saying, you need to do a startup. And I didn't really know quite what it meant for a while. And then launching a product for a big company taught me like, okay, I could do this whole thing. And then I knew a VC and I said, can I have lunch with you? And he says, come over to the office where, and then his managing partner was in. I didn't know that. So I went in there just to have coffee and say, well, I don't know. What do you think? And he says, he's there. Go ahead, pitch. I was like, what? And then by the end, he goes, my pitch was, here's my pitch. And should I quit my job to do this? And I said, yes, you should quit your job. And yes, we'll fund you. So I basically did a test. So find someone you can pitch and so then I went, okay, I'm not completely insane. Okay, I didn't actually take the money because I wasn't ready for it then. I really felt like I had to figure out some stuff. But it was okay, these guys must know something. Why would they lie to me? They don't need to be nice to me. So that's what I did to validate. So go get in front of somebody and say, would you actually give $1 for this thing? So I did all those baby steps, which is assure that I checked with some people if I go start this, would you work on it? Yeah, I'm working on it right now. So I got the team kind of in place. I went and pitched and said, here's what we're doing and here's why. People said, yeah, I'd fund this. So, and I had customers calling me constantly saying, can we have that? Can we have that? Can we have that? So I did everything I could possibly do short of getting out and do it. So those are the baby steps in addition to the program that you can do that's evidence that you're not insane. So just gather evidence and then feel free. But it takes longer to get money than you think. So have money in the bank or a very nice mom and dad, something.
Okay.
Hi. So we are in the very early stages, literally a couple weeks into the game. And when I say we, 3 co-founders, so what I'd like to hear from you is some sense of what was a good way to think through allocating the equity between the founders. And is this the stage to leave behind some equity for strategic partners who will need to develop the product and our board of directors and advisors?
So forget about everybody except for the 3 of you. Do you think everybody should get equal equity?
That's going to, it depends. What I'm thinking is, what has each one brought to the table now, and what are they going to do going forward?
Would you be happy if everyone had equal equity?
Probably not.
Okay. So, and does everyone agree to that? And we don't need to go through this whole thing.
Right.
But everybody has come in as co-founders. Everybody's got a picture in their head of what they think they deserve. And most of the time, everyone thinks they deserve more than others. Mm-hmm. Almost always. Sure. Unless one person or 2 of the people believe that one is running with the show. Mm-hmm. But I think, going back to one of the things Hooman said earlier, is you need to be able to have this conversation about even death of your company. But more importantly, guys, we need to figure out equity. And the sooner you figure it out, the better it is.
We're figuring it out this Saturday, so
right.
that's why I wanted to see if there's...
So the sooner you figure it out, you'll figure out how you work together, how you compromise, who leads discussions, you'll figure out a lot of things about how you guys work together. And there's a chance you might even lose one of your co-founders or two of your co-founders in this process. And it's not a bad thing. But the sooner you figure this out, the sooner you're able to resolve this question, the sooner you'll know whether you can work together.
One mistake that I made, it was, and I don't know if you guys did this with co-founders, equity for co-founders, I don't believe, and again, my mistake, is granted right off the bat. It's got to be earned. It's okay, you can have even 33, 33, whatever, but it's not day zero, everybody get, it depends. There's got to be some vesting period in there. So make that as part of the conversation, so everybody knows that if they walk away tomorrow, they didn't just keep it. So that's one other free lesson from my pain.
In the end, the company needs a little bit of money to get started. $5,000, $10,000, $2,500, $1,000, something, because you will have to pay California state fees, $800 or something per year anyway. So you're going to need to get some money. The moment you have that money conversation, that 33, whoever puts in the money gets the equity. And then you'll see a very immediate split when you bring up, hey, I'm putting in $5,000. How much are you putting in? And whoever puts in the money gets the equity.
Yeah, I'll give you Raj Jaswa's words of wisdom on this topic because it came up in his class, and he's done 4 startups and been very successful. He says, split it equally and forget about it. Very simple, all right? He says, yes, you believe you want more, and there's some formulae out there and all these things you can do. Don't make it overly complicated. Everybody will pitch in. This is his view, right? That's how he does it.
So I'll disagree with that. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I had a VC in a meeting at the time when I was pitching with a co-founder ask us, do you have equal equity? And we did not. And afterwards, when I was just catching up with him, he's a friend, I ended up not taking an investment from that firm. And I said, why did you ask that question? It actually caused certain tensions because my co-founder at the time thought that was the VC suggesting that it should have been equal. And that was the root of some of the issues we had. And he said, actually, I was asking to make sure it wasn't equal because there needs to be one person whose neck is on the line. When everything goes bad, VCs don't want to have a fight with 4 people or any investors for that matter. They want to be able to say, who's the person I turn to? And is their neck a little bit farther out on the line than everybody else's? And so while some people believe that equal is best, and some of the best companies in the world, Nutanix is a good example of this. There were 3 co-founders, equal equity, caused a lot of problems. In the middle, 2 of them are out of the company. One of them is now, their neck is fully on the line, Dheeraj. And I know all 3 of the co-founders there. But a lot of investors, a lot of VCs especially, prefer if it's not purely equal, where there is one leader, not just from a title perspective, but from an equity perspective. So just something else to keep in mind.
I think to build on that a little bit more, I have a theory that with every funding round, you will lose one co-founder. And the reason is, suppose you are 3 co-founders, right? So after you raise your first round of money, there's going to be 5 board members, 2 from the investors, 1 independent, and 2 from common. So out of the 3 of you, only 2 will make it there. So that third one is already kind of feeling excluded, okay? And the investors and the people who are running the management team are going to report into the board, and those 2 out of the 3 now have a lot more control. It's not very direct. It goes back to the relationships you have within the 3 of you, but that one person is going to begin to feel excluded. Now, fast forward a little bit more, you raise some more money, maybe another milestone is hit, and the CEO of the company has a much closer relationship with the investors because he wants to make sure, or she wants to make sure that she doesn't get fired or replaced, right? So the investors and one of the 3 of you will have a much tighter relationship, and that second person will begin to feel left out. So when you look at a lot of companies who have 3 or 2 co-founders, you will always see that there's a natural time when they move on, right? And it just happens when the company grows. You have more and more people join. The responsibilities for each co-founder kind of goes down over time because there's other people joining in. You just have to be aware of that. And just know that, whether you decide to go 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, or everyone has a little bit different ownership. It goes back to the relationship. Are you having fun working with the people you are? But know that everyone's time will come up at one point, right? Like you're not going to be in this company forever.
Okay, let's go to the question.
Great.
I
Thank
think
you very
we
much.
We have a question?
Hello, my name is Simarjeet. I have two questions. At the end of the 5 months, what are the program deliverables?
What are the program deliverables?
Yeah. So once someone joins, at the end of the 5 months, what are the takes he or she has when he leaves?
So what have you gained in the 5 months? Is that your question? Or was it what are you going to give?
What does program give?
Okay. So
end of
as I
5
said, when you start any seriously difficult journey, you want to get prepared. And my nutshell of SLP is that through the program, it helps you prepare for the startup journey, or in some cases, it confirms for you perhaps that this is not for me, right? That you say that this is not something I want to go after. You would have learned in detail about various topics that we've been discussing a little bit superficially here because that's all the time we have. Even the conversation we just had, there will be an entire conversation about how do you split equity between co-founders, and then pros and cons of that, right? So those are the kinds of things that you would get out of it. So at the end of the 5 months, you really are a lot more smarter about whether you want to do this, and if you're going to do it, then you're a little bit better equipped, and you have a lot more confidence in being able to do it, right? I want to ask if there's something else.
So deliverables. You get to pitch several times.
Oh, yeah.
To a group of people who are interested in what you have to say. You get to pitch in front of VCs, get their feedback. You get to ask questions of lawyers and VCs in a very small setting that you would not have access to those people other than in a large format. So it's access to people who are knowledgeable about the area. It's the opportunity to get feedback on what you're doing. It's the opportunity to ask questions in a very safe environment so you don't have to look dumb in front of anybody. Those are very concrete things that you get. And that pitch deck, like we pitch at the end, we pitch at the beginning, it evolves. You can actually see your classmates evolve. You can see like, oh, that's nice the way they changed that explanation. So there's no substitute for standing up and having to explain what you're doing and getting feedback and questions from people. And you don't waste a meeting with a VC who now decides they're not going to fund you to get that. You actually get to do it in a safe place. So that's a very clear deliverable.
Understand. Thank you. And my second question is, how do you differentiate with, for example, Founders Institute?
Actually, so I'll tell you, somebody else may be more familiar with the Founders Institute, but just one of the key differentiators here, and I should have emphasized that at the very beginning, is this is a program for the individual, all right? So it is really developing the person to be a leader and an entrepreneur. It's not as much about the startup per se, right? We believe the startup actually will evolve, will pivot, etc. A lot of the accelerators out there may actually focus more on the startup and getting you through with that startup itself, and give you resources to make that happen. I'll let somebody else comment on the Founders Institute, but this really is investing in you as an individual, all right? So
yeah, and kind of tying both your questions together, there is no demo day at the end. There is no day when a bunch of VCs come in and judge startups. A lot of, I joined the program before I was ready to do a startup. She joined a program as she was getting started. He joined a program a few years after he started his company. So everyone's at different stages. It's about developing you as an individual, regardless of where you are in the life cycle. And I think the other deliverable that SLP gives you back is that network of not just being able to say, I know 2,200 people. You will not know 2,200 people, but you will know 20 people extremely well, and you will have access to 2,200 people. So when I was at Google, I managed a team in Tokyo. And the first time I went to Tokyo, my team there was all Japanese. I'm vegetarian. They were all very heavy seafood eaters. So I actually emailed the SLP Tokyo PL and said, hey, dude, can you help me out with finding some good vegetarian food here? And he took me out to a restaurant that to this day, whenever I go back to Tokyo, I still visit. So something as soft as that is something that you get out of the program from that global scale.
Got it. Thank you.
okay, all right.
I actually applied to Founders Institute and I was accepted there at the same time I was getting accepted here. So I made the choice. And one thing is that I don't like the idea of Founders Institute taking equity, because I'd actually created a lot of IP assets, right? The work that I'd done already when I started, I'd spent a year coding, and we had assets of a technical merit that were very valuable. So I didn't feel like you have an idea and you get, they take 7% equity and it's the day one versus you've been working on it. So for me, the equity piece, and I have nothing to say negative about Founders Institute because I didn't do it. I was accepted into it, I applied, but I just didn't feel that was right without, there's no valuation that sets that equity. So that was a deal breaker for me.
Sure. Thank you.
I think Everett wants to make a point. Go ahead, Everett.
I want to make a quick point. One of the big things about startup leadership that I think is different. One of the big things I think that's very different about the startup leadership and other programs in the Valley is that there's a difference between education and learning. And a lot of the programs that I've seen are very centered around having, somebody brought up mentors before, right? Bringing in a set group of mentors, bringing in a set group of people who are going to essentially prescribe you a method of developing your startup. Whereas in this case, what we really focus on is getting the person to learn along the way. So you're actually, with your class, you're gonna be the teachers of how this is gonna work. So you go out, you reach out into the community. We provide the infrastructure to do that and the support, but it really falls on your shoulders to go out and make it happen. And I think that's a very valuable piece for when you start your company on your own down the road, that you've actually gone through some of that process. Instead of, if you've gone through a Y Combinator or 500 startups and you've had everybody hold your hand along the way, and then all of a sudden you have money, and then what do you do? So it's really this sort of nice walk along with a group of people that you could really trust and that become your sort of lifetime network. So this goes with you forever. I mean, all of these guys talk about how they continue to connect with all these people. We give you a lot more, and it doesn't cost you anything. I mean, $500 it's negligible. So.
Okay. Just to add to that really quick, the $500 is actually going just to pay for the expenses. It's not, it is a nonprofit. It's just paying for your dinners. I don't know if it covers drinks. And one of my two of my favorite memories of SLP over the years was going to Napa with all the fellows of previous years and just spending a day getting to know them, and then doing an overnight trip to Tahoe and playing poker till the wee hours of the morning. I think to me one of the biggest values was the people.
Okay. Question.
Sanjay, I will say though, when I applied 5 or 6 years ago, it was $300, not $500.
Okay, it's $525. I didn't make it $525. By the way, honestly, after the $525, first of all, the following year you get time membership for free. If you want to do ROI on this thing, it's phenomenal. So that's one thing. The second is there's several startup conferences in the Bay Area. They amount to several $100s. You get it for free because somebody in the class says, I have 10 passes. So I did Lean Startup last year. I did Startup World. These are all hundreds of dollars of conferences for which I went for free. So these are all things that, if you want to do mathematical, and of course, dinners are every day whenever we meet. Those things are covered. So from a money standpoint, this is a hugely great deal. It's really, but the advantages are well beyond that. I think you have a question, then I'd like to go here after that. Yeah, go ahead.
I had a quick question in regards to funding. I know a lot of companies probably are just getting started. Some of them already have some kind of a business running. And everybody on the panel had a different way of raising. You raised even before you started, you raised after a year and a half. When is the right time to raise, and how does SLP help in terms of raising in that perspective?
I think every startup is different, and it goes to figuring out when is the right time for you to raise. For me, I wanted to start building a product that required a lot of infrastructure, required a lot of engineers, and I could not possibly get the caliber of engineers that I wanted and pay for them all myself. My previous position at Google made fundraising relatively simple for me, so I leaned on that to take advantage of it. So my first fundraise was actually without a pitch, without much of a pitch. It was about me. It was about the fact that I've executed in the past. And it was a bet on me being able to put together a good team. And that was something that I was very clear about. My investors were very clear with me about. But it was an advantage I have. You take whatever advantage you have as a team, as a person, as an idea, as a vision, and just do it when you can. For some companies, you have to wait to show a little more proof because you don't have the same kind of a track record, and you get to that point and then you raise. So I think Nina said this earlier, and I think it's right. When you can get money, take the money. And so if you can get it early, take it. Of course, you want to take it at the terms that you want.
Okay, I think you have a question here.
Actually, there was that follow-up question on how does SLP can help in terms of, because somebody coming in from the outside of the valley, if they don't have the people in their network, how SLP can help in that?
So the year after you and I did it, it was Raj Jain was in a subsequent year. Raj Jain was he was the year after us. He was the year after us, and then he ran. Yeah, anyway, so he then became the chief of staff for Vinod Khosla, and was like followed him around to every board meeting for all of his companies. And I mean, the access to that person, now he's doing his own startup now, but like, I mean, I don't look at SLP having to do something for you. Look at the group of people you are around, and the kind of people who are in that class are pretty incredible. I mean, I've met with Raj many times since then, and to be able to take advantage of his experience and what he's seen and how he's seen it from a very, very different perspective than most of the other members of SLP. That's phenomenal. And those are the kinds of people that I think make up SLP.
Yeah. So Anupendra, who's the lead of this, who started this, he himself is a VC at Siemens. But on the other hand, through the class, I got introduced to at least 10 VCs, and in San Francisco chapter, probably another 10 VCs there. So you create this network that can validate for you. So let me, unless there's anything else to add on
Yeah,
that.
so most years, there's at least a couple of VCs that are either part of the San Francisco or Silicon Valley chapter. I think I was confusing another guy by the name of Rama Shekhar, who was in our class, who's now at Norwest and has been at Norwest for a while. Since then, and actually even at that time he just wanted to network with entrepreneurs and see it from their light as going part of SLP. So every year, every couple of years, there's also some of those members that are part of not just the Silicon Valley chapter, but other chapters around the world.
Okay.
Let's take the question from here.
Yeah, my name is Swami, and I just started thinking. I have some idea and working on it. So regarding patent question, actually, so after going to a lot of websites, I'm under the impression that you need to have patent first before even talking to your friends or anybody. But it sounded like different. So is it so in software or?
So my point is, I think the validation of the idea that you have that you're trying to patent, assuming you're trying to patent so you can actually create some business, the commercial part of it, right? So I think in order to be able to understand that second part, whether this is a commercially viable component here, you have to be able to share it. You can certainly go to the patenting part, but I would emphasize, my personal view, emphasize the commercial, assuming that's really what you want to go after. Unless you want a plaque on a wall, and that's great. We do that in big companies a lot, right? We just put plaques one after another, but that's something else. That's just to say I have all these patents. But if you want to create a business, then I think it's worth validating and spending the energy on that end. But that's my view. I don't know what other folks.
But you should take formal legal advice, and what we say is not formal legal advice.
Yeah. But you get IP money as well, right? It's not just.
Yeah, it's going to cost you lots of money to do the patenting, by the way. So.
I think lawyers from Fenwick and Oric and all those guys, all the patent attorneys have all said the same thing to me once. Every time I go in to talk to them, they say, whatever you've come up with, they'll find 10 other patents that cover it already. So it's just an evil necessity. Do it, but know that it's probably already been done in some way, and there's going to be some patent out there that you're going to conflict with, but file it anyway. It's an evil thing. You've got to do it.
I think, and the similar question was brought up a little bit earlier, it's not the idea of the patent per se, and I know we talked about execution, so certainly that goes aside. But when you're thinking about an idea or when you're actually trying to build a business, one of the aspects of the business that you have to think about is what is your differentiation? What is going to make you different than somebody else who may try to do something similar? And you have to think about building a strategy and a blocking strategy and say, okay, if some company X does this, what are we going to do? How are we going to separate ourselves? How are we going to protect our space? So Some people think, oh, well, we got a patent that nobody else can touch. Unless you're in the medical devices space or in that area, start thinking about building a business strategy and build customer base. Customer base can be your biggest asset, better than a patent, because those are the customers that if you can keep, nobody else can take those guys away from you. So and those are part of the fundamentals of the business. I think one of the areas of SLP that is great is for those of us who started in engineering school but don't, it's almost like a $500. Sorry, yeah, it's increased. Mine was even cheaper than that, just to be fair. I don't think we paid. This is the advantage of being the founders, right? I'm still waiting for my equity to come back. But anyway, one of the things is it's a $500 MBA class, okay? That you talk about these things that are more fundamental than paying some lawyers tens of thousands of dollars around the patent, which, by the way, there are hundreds of people probably trying to go after the same thing as Ankit mentioned. So that's my input.
Okay, we'll probably...
Yeah. So another question regarding partners you choose. So one of my friends suggested that, so if you are a software expert, choose a partner who can do good at marketing instead of a software expert, right? So what do you think about it?
I was just going to finish up with a patent for a second. So I have 25 granted patents. I've filed probably 45 in my career. And just understand that a patent is nothing more than a license to go sue someone you think could be infringing. Right. Are you ever going to have that money in your budget? No, seriously, as a startup, are you ever, if you have a patent, are you really going to go after somebody in there? So you really can't execute on it. So I'm just saying, having built a patent portfolio, patents are a checkoff item for a VC. They don't even know what you've patented, honestly. You say, do you have a patent? Yes. They don't actually have the sophistication sometimes to check. So I do think you need patent protection at some point. But of the jobs that you have to do and of the things you have to take the risk down, this is not going to kill you. Yeah. Everybody likes a perfect patent portfolio, but if you go and do the related work search, and by the way, you shouldn't be searching for nearby patents. It's a bad patent hygiene. You should let your patent attorney do it. But it's so expensive, and you're talking $30K for a good patent, and you can write a crappy provisional patent for nothing, but you have 1 year. Yeah. And then that provisional is disclosed. Right. So there's risks in doing provisional. So, if you have someone you can work with, and if you go to Oric or any of these guys, they'll run up a 30, 40K bill just thinking about your patent. So it's a lot of money, and it won't help you. So that's my non-legal, I'm not a lawyer advice.
About your second question, do you need, if you're a software engineer, do you need a marketing partner? It depends on what you're doing. If you need the next year to go build your product, then you don't need a marketing person today. Do you need marketing friends who can validate whether they'll be able to validate and market your idea? Probably. That's with any kind of validation. Just like you validate customers, you want to be able to validate your product from a marketing perspective. Is this something marketable? What is the story that you need to tell? If it's a software product, what story are you going to tell? Meaning, what APIs do you need? But when you hire the marketing person, or do you bring them as a co-founder? That depends on your product, in my opinion. Okay.
And sometimes I hear that you start with something, some idea you start with, but at the end of the day, you might end up with something different. So is that a right strategy, or do we ever go that way? Let's say you have an idea and you are not certainly sure. So it may work 60%, 40% so. But some people say, start with it, you might end up something better or different.
I think we talked about that a little bit earlier in terms of, like Ankit Jain said, right? He said, jump into it and you'll see how it morphs through its journey. And so what I'm going to suggest, guys, is we'll take one last question from this person here. But let me just set the protocol. I've got the yank from Bhatti. So what I will offer to you folks is, again, my email is sanjay@startupleadership.com. Please email me your questions. I promise you, the co-PLs, myself, our fellow, we'll get back to you, all right? The focus, again, of SLP is developing the individual. And that's part of the mission. Also, as you walk out, you'll get a brochure. So please take that. At the back of the brochure is the mission of SLP. Very close partner with TIE. So there's a lot of collaborative, complementary approach between the two. Anupendra has actually been a Thai, one of the beginning Thai members. He's done this in the Boston side of the house. He still is very active. So very close complementary between relationships between the two. So, okay, with that, I'll take the last question, if you don't mind. We're getting close to 9 o'clock. And actually appreciate all of you sitting through the sauna for the last 3 hours. It's really 2.5 plus 2.
I think there's a very good reason for that. It's just been outstanding panel and outstanding.
Okay, go ahead.
So I had a quick question going back to your MVP. And obviously, it looked like it helped you do that. I'm part of a startup doing hardware, hydrogen storage, so it's very expensive, a lot of safety issues, it takes about 6 months to execute on that just to make the minimum viable product. And your two cases, looks like you didn't need it. Your name carried your company and you found the money early on without having to do an MVP maybe. But how important was it, and how much of a difference did it make for you in having had an MVP, assuming that you did?
I mean, I think I started my company before the phrase MVP came out.
Yeah, well, I'm hearing it. So.
Yeah, I think for me at Micello, it's been more about a journey, about because we were doing something that was different. So for us, when we were trying to bring on team members or talk to customers, it was everyone else is doing outdoor maps, we're doing indoor maps. It was just a different story to begin with. And we just learned our way through. We first built kind of a mobile application. We reached out to friends. We launched it at TyCon and at the Java 1 conference in 2009. Then we learned from people that, I'm now going to this airport. Do you have that mapped out? We said, no, we should do a platform strategy. That makes more sense. So we kind of just kept iterating. And whenever we learned from customers that, hey, our fundamental was we've got this map. Our company metric is maps. How many maps do we have? What have we done in the last week? But how we deliver it, how we package it up, how customers use it, over the last 6 years has just been kind of from one phase to another learning on how we can make use of this data.
But right at the outset, how important was it to have had a minimum function?
I think when we launched, the first time was at the Java 1 conference, Sun Microsystems final conference. And James Gosling blessed our Java application running on a Nokia phone in 2008, where we showed a map of Moscone and we showed the attendees and agenda. So we had enough of an application that you could have fun at that conference. So we took us about 4 months to build, but we knew we had a launch pad. The best thing about having a date when you're launching, whether it's launching at TechCrunch or launching at a conference, is it's a really good forcing function to get your team to deliver. We only launched because we had a date. All right.
First of all, it's a dependent on the industry, but software industry, especially with all the tools and services that are out there, MVP gives you the opportunity, as long as you follow the rules of minimum viable product, gives you the opportunity to stop thinking and overthinking about what the ultimate end product is going to be, and get your first iteration of the product in front of your actual customers and see whether or not you have done anything to address their problem. So, and you can now do it. By the way, I know Sanjay doesn't like the idea of entrepreneurship. I'm at Staples right now, which, this is not the tech genies of the world. But anyway, within 1 month, I joined the company 3 months ago to do for a special project. After the first month, there were so many people back and forth. We should do this, we should do that. We said, look, there's a book called Lean Startup. Let's read it. And now let's look at this, what we can do. And within 1 month, we've launched a new product. I don't think it's ever been done at the company before. Go to staplessource.com. It's a product that we just released and put on the market to see what the customers really say about, hey, is this something that is worth our customers? Do they trust to buy these kinds of products and services from Staples? Far from our end vision of the product, but minimum and viable enough to get immediate feedback. We launched it this morning. We sent an email to 30,000 customers. Our value add, we have that possibility. We got 100 customers come into the site and filled out our form. Okay, we're going to go look at it and see, hey, what do they say? What do we need to do next? What's our next pivot? That's your opportunity of an MVP.
I need to talk to you about indoor maps for staples.
All right, on that note, let me conclude the discussion. Thank you very much, folks, and for the wonderful panel. I thought the best way to showcase SLP is to show the product of SLP. This is it, right here. Okay, thank you.